The war between the Galactic Coalition and the Dominion had lasted 37 cycles. Billions had died. Entire worlds had burned. And now, after decades of bloodshed, both sides had finally agreed to meet aboard a neutral space station called Harmony's Edge. Every species in the Coalition sent their best diplomats. They sent their silver-tongued politicians who could talk for hours without saying anything real. They sent their ancient philosophers who spoke in riddles and demanded respect. They sent their warrior priests who believed peace was just another form of victory. Everyone who mattered was there. And then there were the humans. Park stood at the back of the great conference hall, wearing a simple gray uniform without any medals or marks of rank. He was a cultural, which was a polite way of saying he was nobody important. His job was to sit quietly, take notes, and make sure humanity did not embarrass itself in front of the older species. Earth had joined the Coalition only 2 years ago. In galactic terms, humans were bobbies. They had no great fleets. They had no ancient wisdom. They had nothing to offer except their curiosity and their willingness to learn. The other species tolerated them, but nobody took them seriously. Was fine with this. He had never wanted to be important. He was a teacher before the Coalition found Earth. He taught history to young students in a small town near the mountains. He liked watching and listening more than talking. When the Coalition offered him a position as an observer, he accepted because it meant he could see the galaxy without having to change who he was. His only companion was a translator who spoke 14 galactic languages and had a sharp tongue that got her in trouble more often than not. She stood beside him now, arms crossed, watching the delegations take their seats. "This is going to be a disaster," she whispered. "You do not know that," replied. "I know politicians. These ones have been killing each other for 37 years. They are not going to suddenly become friends because someone put them in the same room." Did not argue. He had read the reports. He knew the history. The Dominion was an empire of warriors who believed strength was the only law. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They had destroyed civilizations older than human history. Their supreme commander, a being called the Undying, was famous across the galaxy. He had personally led the attack on 3 Coalition worlds. Millions had died screaming his name. And now was here, walking through the great doors of the conference hall like a storm made flesh. Had seen pictures of the before, but nothing had prepared him for the reality. Stood over 7 feet tall. His body was covered in black exoskeleton that gleamed like polished stone. His 4 arms ended in claws that could tear through metal. His eyes were compound, made of thousands of tiny lenses that reflected no light, showing nothing of what he thought or felt. Behind him came 6 more warriors, each one carrying weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. They moved in perfect formation, their steps clicking against the floor in a rhythm that sounded like a heartbeat. The Coalition delegates watched in silence. Some of them had lost family some of them had lost entire worlds. The hatred in the room was so thick that could almost taste it. Took his seat at the far end of the table. He did not greet anyone. He did not bow or nod or show any sign of respect. He simply sat down and waited, his claws resting on the table like knives waiting to be used. The lead ambassador for the Coalition was a named sovereign. He was old and tired, and could see the weight of the war in every line of his face. When he spoke, his voice was formal and cold. "We are gathered here to discuss the terms of a ceasefire. The Coalition proposes a mutual withdrawal from contested territories and an exchange of prisoners." Made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You propose surrender and call it peace. We propose an end to the killing. The killing ends when one side wins. That is the nature of war." The negotiations continued like this for hours. Every proposal was rejected. Every compromise was called weakness. They accused the Coalition of hiding secret weapons. The Coalition accused them of planning to break any agreement they signed. Voices grew louder. Tempers grew shorter. sat in his alcove at the back of the room and watched everything. He took notes on his, recording not just the words but the small details that others might miss. He noticed how his claws tightened when the coalition mentioned civilian casualties. He noticed how the commander looked away when someone spoke about the children who had died in the bombing of Prime. He noticed the small hesitations, the brief silences, the moments when the undying seemed almost uncomfortable. These details meant nothing to anyone else. The diplomats were too busy arguing to pay attention to body language. The warriors were too busy hatting to look for anything besides threats, but was a teacher. He had spent his life watching students, learning to read the things they did not say, and he saw something in that did not match the stories. The first day ended without progress. The second day was worse. By the third day, delegates were shouting at each other across the table. By the fourth day, security teams had to separate two ambassadors who had nearly come to blows. Found in the observation deck that night, staring out at the stars. "You have been quiet," she said, "even for you." "I have been thinking." "About what?" Did not answer right away. He was thinking about the way the commander looked away when children were mentioned. He was thinking about a report he had read months ago, a small footnote in a military analysis that nobody else had thought was important. "I think everyone is looking at this wrong," he said finally. "What do you mean?" "They see thee as monsters. They see as a killer. They are so busy hatting him that they never stop to ask why he does what he does." Frowned. "He does it because he is a conqueror. That is what conquerors do." "Maybe," said, "or maybe there is something else, something nobody bothered to look for." He turned away from the stars and walked back toward his quarters. Tomorrow would be the 5th day of negotiations. He had a feeling it would be the last. He was right, but not in the way he expected. The 5th day began badly and got worse with every hour. Arrived at the conference hall early, before most of the delegates had taken their seats. He liked to watch people enter a room. You could learn a lot about someone from the way they walked through a door. Were they confident or afraid? Were they looking for allies or enemies? Were they ready to talk or ready to fight? The coalition delegates entered like soldiers preparing for battle. Their faces were hard. Their movements were sharp. They had spent the night planning arguments and counterarguments, building walls of words to throw at their enemies. They entered like predators. Led them as always, his black exoskeleton catching the light like a dark mirror. His compound eyes scanned the room, noting every face, every weapon, every possible threat. Behind him, his warriors moved in perfect sync, a hunting pack that had killed together 1,000 times. Sat beside in the observer's alcove. She had brought a flask of something strong, hidden in her jacket. "For when this falls apart," she explained, "which should be in about 3 hours. You are very negative today." "I am very realistic. Look at them. They hate each other. They have been hatting each other for 37 years. You cannot fix that with words." Said nothing. He watched the delegations take their seats. He watched the way they refused to look at each other, the way their hands stayed close to hidden weapons, the way their translators struggled to keep up with the insults disguised as formal speech. The morning session was a disaster. The coalition presented evidence of war crimes. They presented evidence of coalition attacks on civilian targets. Both sides accused the other of lying. Both sides demanded apologies that would never come. Took notes. He recorded the names of the dead that were spoken aloud. He recorded the planets that had burned. He recorded the numbers that meant nothing to politicians, but meant everything to the families who would never see their loved ones again. By midday, the shouting had started. A philosopher accused thee of having no honor. A warrior accused thee of being weak cowards who hid behind words. The warrior priests began chanting prayers for the dead, their voices rising and falling in a rhythm that made everyone uncomfortable. Sat through all of this in silence. His claws rested on the table. His compound eyes watched everything. Notice that the commander never joined the shouting. He never defended his soldiers when they were accused of crimes. He never attacked the coalition when they claimed moral superiority. He just watched, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. That moment came in the afternoon. Sovereign, the coalition's lead ambassador, made a mistake. He was tired and frustrated and angry, and he said something he should not have said. "They are animals," he declared, his voice echoing through the hall. "They understand nothing but blood and death. We cannot negotiate with beasts." The room went silent. Rose from his seat. His movement was slow and deliberate, the movement of someone who had killed so many times that death had become as natural as breathing. His claws scraped against the table as he stood, leaving deep scratches in the polished surface. "You call us animals," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the silence like a blade. "You call us beasts, and yet you sit here pretending to want peace while your fleets gather in the shadow of our borders." "That is a defensive measure," began. "That is a lie," reached down to his belt and drew his ceremonial blade. It was a weapon of black metal, curved like a claw, etched with symbols that represented his victories. He held it loosely, almost casually, as if it weighed nothing at all. Security forces on both sides raised their weapons. The room became very still, very dangerous. One wrong move and the ceasefire would end in blood. "This negotiation is finished," announced. "We leave at dawn, the war resumes, and this time we will not stop until every coalition world burns." He pointed his blade directly at Sovereign. "Starting with yours." Grab's arm. "We need to leave now before someone starts shooting." But did not move. He was watching. He was watching the way the commander held his blade, the way his compound eyes flickered, the way his other 3 arms hung at his sides without reaching for his other weapons. And he saw something that nobody else saw. Was waiting, not for an attack, not for a signal from his warriors. He was waiting for something else, for someone to say something, for someone to give him a reason to stop. Did not know why he did what he did next. He was not brave. He was not important. He was just a teacher from a small town who liked to watch and listen. But in that moment, with the galaxy balanced on the edge of destruction, he stood up from his seat and walked forward into the space between the 2 delegations. Guards shouted at him to stop. Weapons turned in his direction, screamed his name. He kept walking. He walked past the coalition ambassadors, past the security teams, past the raised weapons and the angry faces. He walked until he stood directly in front of, close enough to touch the blade that had killed admirals. "Excuse me," he said quietly. His voice was calm, almost polite, as if he was asking a student to pay attention in class. "Before you leave, may I ask you something?" Stared down at him. The commander was so tall that had to crane his neck to meet those compound eyes. He could see himself reflected 1,000 times in those dark lenses. A small, soft creature with no weapons and no armor, and no right to be standing where he stood. "You are the human," said slowly, "the species that watches." "Yes." "You have no authority here. You have no power. You are nothing." Nodded. "I know. I am just an observer. But I have a question, and I think you might want to answer it." His mandibles clicked together. It was a sound of dark amusement, the sound of a predator playing with its prey. "Ask then, little watcher. Ask your question before I resume my work." The room held its breath. Asked. Looked up at the Undying, the most feared warrior in the galaxy, the commander who had burned worlds and slaughtered millions. The blade in his claw gleamed in the cold light of the conference hall. One quick movement and would be dead before his body hit the floor. He was not afraid. Or rather, he was afraid, but the fear felt distant, like something happening to someone else. His mind was clear. His voice was steady. He had spent his whole life watching and listening and learning, and now he was going to use everything he knew. "On your 3rd conquest," began, You attacked a world called Prime. Your fleet was in position above the planet. Your ground forces had broken through the last defenses. Victory was certain, but you stopped. His blade did not move. His compound eyes did not blink. He said nothing. The coalition military reports say you stopped for tactical repositioning. They say you were waiting for reinforcements or gathering your forces for a final push. Shook his head slowly. But that is not what happened, is it? You know nothing about what happened on Prime, human. I know that your fleet was directly above the planet's last hospital. I know that the hospital was full of wounded civilians. I know that there were children inside, waiting for evacuation ships that were still 11 hours away. The room was completely silent. Even the guards had stopped moving. Every eye was on the small human standing before the commander. You could have destroyed that hospital in seconds, continued. Your weapons were aimed and ready. Nobody would have stopped you. Nobody would have blamed you. It was a war, and in war people die. But you did not fire. You waited. You held your entire fleet in position for 11 hours while the evacuation ships arrived and took the children away. Only after the last ship had cleared the atmosphere did you resume your attack. His claws tightened on his blade. His mandibles clicked together, but he did not speak. I found this detail buried in a footnote of an old military report. Nobody thought it was important. Nobody asked why you waited. They just assumed it was tactics. Took a small step closer. But I looked deeper. I found other examples. On Minor, you delayed an orbital bombardment until a school had finished evacuating. On 7, your ground forces avoided a children's shelter even though it would have made tactical sense to destroy it. On Station, you personally ordered your troops to hold fire while a medical transport escaped. He looked directly into those compound eyes, searching for something human in a face that was nothing like his own. 7 times, Commander. 7 times in different campaigns, on different worlds, in different situations. You showed mercy to children when nobody was watching, when nobody would ever know, when it would have been easier and faster and more efficient to simply kill them. Paused, the question hung in the air between them. Why? The silence that followed was the longest of his life. He could hear his own heartbeat. He could hear the soft hum of the station's life support systems. He could hear the breathing of every delegate in the room, all of them waiting to see what would happen next. Lowered his blade, not completely but enough. The tip pointed at the floor instead of its chest. How did you find these records? The commander asked. His voice was different now, quieter, less threatening. I am an observer. It is my job to watch and record and remember. I read everything I can find about the war. Most of it is just numbers and dates and locations, but sometimes in the small details you find the truth. And what truth did you find, little watcher? Took a breath. I found a warrior who is not a monster. I found a commander who follows a code that he hides from everyone, even his own soldiers. I found someone who believes that strength means choosing what you kill, not killing everything. Made a sound. It might have been a laugh. It might have been something else. You see too much, human. I only see what is there. Everyone else was too busy hatting you to look. Behind, the coalition delegates stirred. Sovereign's voice cut through the silence. This is absurd. You cannot seriously believe that this creature has any honor. He has killed millions. He has burned worlds. He is a murderer wearing the mask of a soldier. His compound eyes shifted to the ambassador. The blade rose slightly. But spoke first. I did not say he was honorable. I did not say he was good. I said he was not a monster. He turned to face the coalition delegation, his back to the commander and his raised blade. There is a difference. Monsters cannot be reasoned with. Monsters cannot change. But someone who shows mercy when no one is watching, someone who protects children even when it costs them nothing to kill, that is someone who still has something inside them that can be reached. He looked at Sovereign. You have been negotiating with the wrong image of commander. You have been talking to the monster you created in your minds, not the person standing in this room. Maybe that is why nothing has worked. His face flushed with anger. You are a cultural. You have no authority to speak in these negotiations. I know I am not negotiating. I am only asking questions. Turned back to, you never answered me, Commander. Why do you show mercy when no one is watching? Stared at him for a long moment. The blade slowly lowered until it hung at his side. My clutch mother, he said finally. His voice was quiet, almost soft. She raised me in the old ways before the Dominion became what it is now. She taught me that war is for soldiers, that children are the future, even the children of your enemies. She said that a true warrior chooses his kills. He does not slaughter blindly like an animal. He looked down at his blade. I am called the Undying because I have survived every battle, every war, every assassination attempt, but that is not why I chose the name. He met his eyes. I am undying because I will not let the old ways die. I will not become what they want me to become. I will fight and I will kill, but I will not be a monster. The blade slid back into its sheath. You asked why I show mercy when no one is watching. His mandibles clicked together slowly. But you were wrong, human. Someone was watching. You were watching. Your kind sees everything, and now everyone knows. He turned to his delegation and spoke in the language. The translator in his ear struggled with the words, but, watching from the alcove, understood every syllable. The commander was telling his warriors that the negotiations would continue. The conference hall erupted into chaos after sheathed his blade. Coalition delegates shouted questions at each other. Warriors clicked their mandibles in confusion. Security teams did not know whether to lower their weapons or keep them raised. Nobody understood what had just happened. Nobody except the small human standing in the center of the room and the massive commander looking down at him with something that might have been respect. Felt his legs begin to shake. The fear that had been hiding somewhere far away came rushing back, filling his body with cold trembling. He had just walked into the middle of a galactic war and asked a monster to explain himself. He had just done the bravest thing of his entire life. He wanted to sit down. He wanted to close his eyes. He wanted to go back to being invisible. But was not finished with him. Human, the commander said, his voice cutting through the noise of the room. You have done something no one has ever done before. You have seen me, not the warrior, not the conqueror me. I only asked a question. You asked the right question. That is more than anyone in this room has managed in 37 cycles. Turned to face the coalition delegation. His compound eyes swept across their faces, reading their fear and their hatred and their confusion. You have been fighting us for longer than most of your diplomats have been alive. And in all that time, none of you ever thought to ask why we do what we do. You assumed we were beasts. You assumed we were monsters. You never considered that we might be something else. Sovereign rose from his seat. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. We have negotiated with your kind for years. We have made offers. We have made compromises. Every time you rejected them. Every time you treated us like animals to be caged. You never tried to understand us. You only wanted to control us. Understanding does not bring back the dead. No, his voice was quiet. It does not, but neither does hatred, neither does war. We have been killing each other for 37 cycles, and what has it achieved? More death, more burning, more hatred. The cycle never ends because neither side is willing to see the other as anything but an enemy. He pointed one claw at. This human broke the cycle. He looked at me and saw something besides a monster. He found the truth that everyone else was too blind or too angry to see. His mandibles clicked together slowly. And he did it with nothing but words and attention. No weapons, no threats, no power. Just watching and remembering and asking the question that should have been asked decades ago. The room fell silent again. Could feel everyone staring at him. He wished he could disappear. I am not a diplomat, continued. I am a soldier. I do not know how to make peace. I only know how to make war, but this human has shown me something today. He has shown me that there is another way." He turned to his delegation and spoke in the tongue. His warriors listened, their compound eyes flickering between their commander and the small human who had somehow changed everything. His voice came through his earpiece, translating quietly. He is telling them that the war has become a habit. He is saying that they have forgotten why they started fighting in the first place. The original reasons are gone, buried under layers of revenge and hatred. Now they fight because they have always fought, because they do not know how to stop. Listened as continued speaking. The commander's voice rose and fell in the clicking rhythms of the language, and even without understanding the words, could hear the weight of weariness behind them. He is saying that his clutch mother would be ashamed of what the Dominion has become. He is saying that they were supposed to be warriors, not butchers. He is saying that somewhere along the way they lost themselves. Turned back to face the coalition. His 4 arms hung at his sides. His blade stayed sheathed. He looked, for the first time, almost tired. "I cannot undo what has been done. The dead will not come back. The burned worlds will not grow green again. But I can choose what happens next." He looked at. "You saw me, human. You saw the mercy I tried to hide. You forced me to remember who I was supposed to be." His mandibles clicked once, a sound that might have been gratitude. "For that, I owe you a debt." "You do not owe me anything. I owe you the truth, and the truth is that I am tired of war. I am tired of killing children's parents and telling myself it is necessary. I am tired of burning worlds and calling it victory." He looked at the coalition delegation. "I am tired of being the monster you need me to be." Sovereign stepped forward. His expression was careful, guarded, but there was something new in his eyes, something that looked almost like hope. "What are you proposing, Commander?" "I am proposing that we try something different. I am proposing that we stop looking at each other as enemies and start looking at each other as people." Gestured toward. "This human has no power. He has no authority. He is nothing but an observer. And yet he did more in 5 minutes than our diplomats have done in 5 days. Perhaps that tells us something." "What does it tell us?" His compound eyes met the ambassador's gaze. "It tells us that we have been approaching this wrong. We have been sending warriors to make peace. We have been sending politicians to end a war. Perhaps what we need is someone who knows how to see, someone who knows how to listen, someone who can look past the hatred and find the truth." He pointed at again. "I want the human at the table, not as an observer, as a witness, someone who will watch and remember and ask the questions that need to be asked." His heart nearly stopped. "I am not qualified for that," he said quickly. "I am just a teacher. I do not know anything about diplomacy or politics or—" "You know how to see people," interrupted. "That is more important than any of those things." Sovereign looked at with new eyes. For the first time since the negotiations began, the old ambassador smiled. "It seems, Cultural Park, that you have been promoted." Looked at, she was staring at him from the alcove, her mouth hanging open in shock. He looked at the coalition delegation, at the warriors, at the guards with their weapons now lowered. He looked at the undying, the monster who was not a monster, the warrior who had been waiting 37 years for someone to see him. And for the first time in his life, Park had nothing to say. The negotiations lasted another 3 weeks. They were not easy. Decades of hatred could not be erased in a few days. There were arguments and accusations and moments when it seemed like everything would fall apart again. But something had changed. The cycle of blame and counterblame had been broken. For the first time, both sides were trying to understand each other instead of just defeat each other. Sat at the table now, not in the observer's alcove. He did not speak often. He did not need to. His job was to watch and listen and ask questions when the conversation went off track. When the coalition delegates began treating them like animals, he reminded them of Prime and the 11 hours of mercy. When the warriors started seeing every proposal as an insult, he asked them what their clutch mothers would want them to do. It was strange work for a teacher from a small town, but in some ways it was not so different from what he had always done. In his classroom, he had watched students struggle with ideas that seemed too big for them. He had learned when to push and when to step back. He had learned that people often knew the right answers already. They just needed someone to help them find the words. The same was true here, just on a larger scale. Stayed by his side through all of it. She translated the difficult conversations, the ones that happened in private meetings and quiet corridors where the real work of diplomacy took place. She also made sure ate and slept, and did not forget that he was still human. "You are going to burn yourself out," she warned him one night, finding him alone in the observation deck with a cup of cold tea in his hands. "I am fine." "You have been fine for 18 days. Nobody is fine for 18 days. He smiled tiredly. "I used to teach high school history. 30 teenagers in a room, all of them convinced that they knew everything and I knew nothing. This is easier. 30 teenagers never threatened to destroy the galaxy. You never met my students." She laughed, and for a moment the weight of everything lifted from his shoulders. Then he looked out at the stars again, and the weight came back. "Do you think this will work?" he asked quietly. "Do you think they will actually make peace?" Sat down beside him. "I think you gave them a chance. That is more than anyone else has done." "A chance is not the same as success." "No, but it is a start." 3 days later, the Armistice of Harmony's Edge was signed. It was not a perfect agreement. There were compromises that made both sides unhappy. There were provisions that would take years to implement. There were details that still needed to be worked out, arguments that still needed to be had, wounds that still needed to heal. But it was peace, real peace. For the first time in 37 cycles, the guns fell silent. Stood at the back of the hall during the signing ceremony. He had refused a seat at the main table. He had refused the medals that both sides wanted to give him. He was still just an observer, he insisted. He had not done anything special. He had just asked the right question at the right time. Nobody believed him, but they stopped arguing. Found him after the ceremony, as the delegates were drinking and celebrating and pretending that they had always wanted peace. "You are hiding," the commander observed. "I am observing." "You are hiding, I know the difference." Smiled slightly. "Maybe I am both." Stood beside him, his massive form blocking out the light from the celebrations behind them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I have been thinking about what you said," finally began. "About seeing people, about looking past the hatred to find the truth." "What about it?" "I have been fighting for a very long time. I have seen many things, but I have never met a species quite like yours." Raised an eyebrow. "We are considered primitive by galactic standards. We have only been in space for a few generations." "That is not what I mean." His compound eyes turned to look at the stars beyond the observation deck windows. "Every other species I have encountered wants power. They want control. They want to shape the galaxy according to their own image. But you humans, you just want to watch, to understand, to see things as they are, not as you wish them to be." "That is not entirely true. We have had plenty of conquerors in our history." "Perhaps, but you also had teachers, you had watchers, you had people who believed that understanding was more important than power." His mandibles clicked slowly. "That is what saved us today, not weapons, not threats, just a single human who cared enough to look." Did not know what to say to that. "I asked my warriors what they thought of you," continued. "They said you were weak, small, harmless. They did not understand why I respected you." "What did you tell them?" "I told them that the most dangerous being in the galaxy is not the one with the biggest weapons. It is the one who sees what others miss." Turned to face him. "You saw my mercy, human. You saw the code I tried to hide. You saw me. And in seeing me, you gave me a choice I did not know I had. What choice was that? The choice to be what my clutch mother wanted me to be, instead of what the war made me become. He extended one of his 4 arms. In his claw was a small object made of dark metal. It was shaped like an eye with a single lens at its center. This is a Watcher's mark. In the old days, before the Dominion became what it is now, we gave these to those who could see the truth when others were blind. He pressed it into his hand. You are the first non to receive one in 1,000 cycles. Look down at the small metal eye. It was warm in his palm, almost alive. I do not deserve this. You deserve more than this, but it is all I have to give. Turned and walked away, his footsteps clicking against the floor in that familiar rhythm. At the door, he paused and looked back. Your species calls itself humanity. We call you something different in our language. It does not translate perfectly, but the closest meaning is those who remember. It is a title of great respect. He left without another word. Found still standing there an hour later, holding the Watcher's mark and staring out at the stars. They are calling you the Watcher who stopped a war, she said. It is all over the galactic news networks. Earth is going crazy. I did not stop anything. I just asked a question. You asked the question that 37 years of diplomacy could not figure out. She stood beside him, looking out at the same stars. You saw something in that nobody else saw, something he was hiding even from himself, and because you saw it, everything changed. Closed his fingers around the Watcher's mark. Humanity was only supposed to watch, he said quietly. We were supposed to be observers, nobodies. We were not supposed to matter. Smiled. Maybe that is exactly why we mattered. Maybe that is what makes us special. We are not trying to conquer or control. We are just trying to understand. And sometimes understanding is enough. Thought about and the children he had saved when no one was looking. He thought about Prime and the 11 hours of mercy. He thought about all the small details that everyone else had missed because they were too busy hatting to see clearly. He thought about what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of warriors and conquerors and ancient powers. We watch, he said finally. We remember. We ask the questions that no one else thinks to ask. He looked at the Watcher's mark in his hand, then slipped it into his pocket. Maybe that is enough. Raised an imaginary glass in the air. To the Watchers, she said. Smiled. To the Watchers. Outside the observation deck, the stars burned on in silence. The war was over. The peace had begun. And somewhere in the vastness of space, a species that had only been meant to watch had changed the fate of the galaxy. Not with weapons, not with power, not with threats or demands or force. Just by seeing, just by remembering, just by asking the one question that no one else had thought to ask. The humans had only been spectators, but sometimes being seen was the most powerful thing in the universe.